Okay, so my name is Wout Withagen. I'm the CEO at Freshheads, and we're based in Tilburg. And our company is focusing on supply and demand platforms, service design, and innovation. And this is specifically about innovation, and we do help some big companies to innovate because it's really hard for them. So to start with, I want to start with this picture, and this picture is actually part of a family anecdote, because this is the boat my dad sailed on. He was a captain at one of the biggest chemical tankers in the world. It was actually a tanker specially built to fit in the Panama Channel, so it just fits in the big lock there. And he sailed the world around it. It had over 30 people constantly working at the ship. It took miles to stop it. And it took 4 towing ships to get the ship into the harbor. So it was a really big thing. They also had a swimming pool. They had bikes, which they drove it on the deck. So my dad retired recently, but it's still really cool. But I remember that at one time when I was 12, my dad bought a sailing boat, and we went on vacation with that sailing boat. It was a first vacation, and we didn't have any experience with sailing. And the first trip, because my dad was used to sea sailing, went to England. We went to Brighton, so the first trip was out at sea. So we went through the locks with the ship, and I remember my dad, handling the throttle like burn, going forward, burn, going backward, and we were almost damaging all those other ships and also damaging our own ship, and we were trying to tow ropes to the wall. And in the Netherlands it's common that people are gazing over the side of the locks when ships come in to laugh, when everything goes wrong. So we were one of those families where everything went wrong at that time. My dad started cursing at me, "Godverdomme, what are you doing?" And he was yelling at me, "Zoetwatermatroos," and stuff like that. And I was thinking, like, you're the captain of a tanker, you can't even, sail this thing into a lock, which is a really small boat. So, and the thing is that this is a perfect metaphor of what's going wrong with innovation at big companies. Everybody knows the metaphor of an oil tanker versus a speedboat. This is exactly what's going on. My dad couldn't steer a speedboat, but he was able to steer a tanker, but he couldn't steer a steerboat. And that's what's happening at big companies when they try to innovate. They're actually too big to innovate, because to innovate you have to be able to adapt. And actually, this is the theory of Darwin. We all know. Adapt or die, or the theory of natural selection. And it's really important to, in a world where we have all these trends and developments, and this is just a few of them. For example, the sharing economy. We all know Peerby, and we also know Snapcar, where it's not about owning, but it's about having access to all those devices and stuff. Hyperlocality is, for example, Uber. I think you all know Uber, and it can only exist because Uber knows where you are, and it can send a taxi really fast to the spot where you are at that moment. Niche markets, and we all know the long tail theory. Sustainability, so efficient use of overcapacity. And of course, there's artificial intelligence, which Tom talked about few seconds ago. And one is self-service, and this is a case called Flexbook, which is an application we built for an employment agency, and they now have over 1,000 people using this application to find jobs nearby at a really fast pace. So future-proof organizations need to adapt fast, and they need to engage with the latest developments. And therefore they have to be a speedboat. So startup thinking is really important to stay relevant, and trends are developing really fast, and technology is developing really fast, and digital and online technology is one of the most important drivers for innovation. So what does it take to be a speedboat? And these are some good lessons. So you have to be extreme proactive. For example, service design and design thinking is really important, as we saw the examples earlier today. Companies are becoming more and more like people and not only brands. You have to be capable of exceeding the organization and market. You also have to see chances in chaos, because you can see all those developments as threats, but you should look at them as chances. You also have to understand what it is to have a flexible business model, because it's really hard, especially for big companies, to change the business model all over and over again. And as a startup, you have to be able to do that. Everything runs around added value, so everything runs around the user and creating added value for the user you're designing the product for. And I want to show you an example, and this is an example of a case called Zorg voor elkaar, which is a platform. It's a care platform for supply and demand, both professional but also voluntary care. And actually these guys, they thought of a platform where they would earn money by selling by selling the product to these care organizations. But they ended up with a SaaS solutions for local government organizations. So local governments in the Netherlands are paying these guys to use the platform, because they have to arrange the care in the Netherlands. So during the development of the platform and during the years, we changed the business model a few times. So it's really important that you are able to change. So it's important to think about what you are. Are you this oil tanker, or are you a speedboat? And then the next question is, why do so much startups fail? Because like we said in the beginning, and it's a common given that 9 out of 10 startups fail. And if you ask people why their startup failed, they come up with these arguments. The first one is bad timing, but it was still a great idea. The second one is bad execution, but it was a great idea. The budget was too small yet. It was another great idea, but we didn't make it. And then, after all, bad technology. It was a great idea still, but the developers, they messed it up. But the truth is, and there's a company who did some research on it, they called MarketWatch, and they've researched the first 100 startup failures of this year. And the truth is, number 1, nobody's interested in the idea. Number 2, they're out of cash. Number 3, not the right team. Number 4, they get outcompeted. And no feasible business model, or you can't earn any money with it. But wait a minute. Oh, nobody's even interested in the idea. I mean, that's quite a thing. If you start with an idea, if you start a startup, or you start with developing an idea within a company and nobody's even interested in the idea, I mean, it's quite harsh to come after a whole project launch and you find out that nobody's interested in the idea. So that's why we came up with this demo or die approach. And it's actually an approach based on the Lean Startup by Eric Ries, and I think hands from all the people who've read it. It's still not a lot. I'm always amazed when I tell this story, because I always think everybody's read this book by Eric Ries, The Lean Startup, and I think you should read it. But this approach is mainly based on that book. So it's about validation of the idea. You iterate on the idea, you develop an MVP, which is a really hard word in our business to develop a minimum viable product. And then, of course, demo it, show it to the public, and then incorporate the idea and iterate on it. So what is important for the digital design process of this approach is that failure is an option, and I think that's the most important thing that you can learn today from my presentation, because failure is an option means that if nobody's enthusiastic about the project, you should stop it right away. And this has some impact, because if a whole team is working on this idea and realizing this idea and is really enthusiastic about the idea itself, and they found out that if they show the first prototype to the public and the public says, nah, it's not such a good idea, then you have to stop the project. And it means that all the budget which is allocated for the project, is gone. And especially if you're working at an agency, or an agency says, well, we've had this project, and now the project is gone. So the money is gone, and the team is sitting there and with nothing to do. So it's actually not an option. So we have to rethink the whole design process. And also, if you are a startup and you have funding, and you realize that during the realization of the project, you just have to stop because your idea sucks. So it's really a thing to think about. On the other hand, commitment is really important. You're doing it together as a startup or with the company you're working on the idea, so everybody should be full on it. On the other hand, it's all about value creation. That's why you're validating your idea constantly. So you have to ask your end user constantly whether they're really waiting for this product you're building. And you have to learn how to build this in small steps, because we tend to build really great and complicated technology. And now we have to learn to build small steps, iterate, validate, and then actually build a big thing. So innovation should be at the core of your business, and it's also really important to know that nowadays, and I think it's a good thing, that you see a lot of companies have an innovation department. And it's a good thing to start with, but innovation should be throughout the whole company. So everybody from cleaner to C-levels should be busy with innovating the company, because otherwise you're not going to make it, you won't be able to adapt, and you won't make it in the future. And that's why you should start with the demo or die process, and I think I was really fast in my presentation, so there's a lot of room for questions. And well, this is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Wout.